So thank you for joining us for this presentation of RecXpress for bank services. This module will give you the ability to automate reconciliation of your bank statements within Sage 300. So it will activate like any Sage module would through the administrative services, and you'll see that it will embed itself within the bank services module. It's a very simple product for you to get installed and activated. And the main screen is this RecXpress screen. Again, I'll ask everyone to please make sure your microphones are muted. So when you open up the RecXpress screen, you'll be able to choose a bank code, and this would be the existing bank codes that you have within. Sorry, I'm going to stop the recording, and we're getting some feedback here, so I'm going to ask people to mute themselves again. We still have people joining us, so maybe I'll just give it a minute. Sorry for the interruption here. Let's just give it a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to actually restart the presentation since we haven't gotten too far in. So thank you again for joining us today. We really appreciate that. We're going to go over the RecXpress for Bank Services module today. So this module is written using the same software development kit as Sage 300, and it embeds itself within the Sage Bank Services module. So the module would be activated through your administrative services, and then you will see it embed itself within the Bank Services module. The main screen is this RecXpress screen, and we're able to read the information in Sage 300. So we're not duplicating any data, but we're giving you the ability to automate reconciling your bank statement. So you'll be linking to an existing bank code within Sage 300. And the main difference between this product and the standard tool that comes in the bank services module is the ability for you to create rules and continually add new rules so that transactions can be handled automatically through your bank statement. And we'll have a look at what those rules look like. So you can have one rule template if you want to be able to use that across multiple bank accounts. But of course, you could have multiple rules templates if necessary. You'll be able to see existing information from Sage 300, so things like deposits and withdrawals outstanding. And if you have unposted entries, you'll be able to see those as well on this front screen. So essentially what you'll be doing is you'll be downloading the bank statement from your banking software and importing it into this software. So you would just browse and pick up that statement that you've just downloaded from the bank, and then you would go ahead and import that into RecXpress for Bank Services. And you'll notice as soon as I click this import button, it's going to start going through the matching routine. And what it's going to do is it'll pass through the information twice. So it'll pass through the first time looking for a reference to match. So these are entries in bank services. And then it will pass through a second time, and it will try to do a match based on the amount. And if it finds more than one amount that's the same, then it will look to the date to determine which entry to match against. And then I can open up the main screen and see all of those bank statement entries that have just been imported through the software. Now, as far as how the import routine works and how we're able to read the bank statement, RecXpress for Bank Services, we configure file formats to be able to read those bank statements. So there's a couple hundred of them in there now, but typically we would ask for you to send a copy of the file that you're downloading from the bank, and we can ensure that we have the correct file format in the software to be able to read that bank statement. If by chance that file format is not in the software, then Parasoft will add that free of charge, and so there shouldn't be a concern as to whether or not you'd be able to use this software. Now, once I've got these entries imported into the software, I can see all the entries from that bank statement. But with this show bank, it gives me the ability to split the screen. And at the top, I'm still seeing those entries from the bank statement that I've just imported. But at the bottom, I'm able to see entries in the bank services module. There's a number of different import statuses that can be assigned to the entries. So for example, I can view those entries that were correctly matched. So these are the ones that the software matched on that import routine. And I can click on any of the lines from the statement, and I can see the corresponding entry in bank services that it matched it against. So I can view those that were correctly matched. We do have a category that's called matched with error. And what falls into this category would be an entry from the statement that it found the corresponding entry in bank services, but there's a variance in the amount. So it will match it. In this case, you can see there's an import amount of $1720.82. But when I look at the bank services entry, it's actually $1720.92. So it will match the entry and show the variance in the amount. And then you can handle, determine what that variance is, why it's there, and how you want to handle it. You can also view the entries that were matched solely based on the amount. And again, I can click on a line and I can view the corresponding entry in bank services to ensure that I'm satisfied with how it did that matching. Now, if it comes across more than one amount, then I can also filter by that, and I can see the entries that have more than one amount that are the same to determine if the software matched it the way I want to see it. You'll notice down here under the used column, the yes means that's the entry that it matched against. I could easily double click and remove that and double click on the line above if I wanted to change how it did that matching routine. So although the software matches these entries, it is quite easy for you to override what it's done before you actually post it into Sage 300. Now, ultimately, you'll be left with the no match entries where you will come to do your reconciliation. But another key feature I want to highlight with this software that you don't have with the standard bank services module is the ability for you to take one statement line and match it against multiple transactions in bank services, or the other way around, multiple lines on the statement relate to one entry in bank services. You don't have that capability with the standard tool in bank services. So we've added that capability for you. Now that's something that a user will have to do, in terms of determining which entries need to be matched together. But as I said, you'll be left with these no match entries where you will go about doing your bank reconciliation. Now you can sort these entries by reference, by date, by amount, and you can also resort in ascending or descending order. But you can filter as well by category. So there's different types of transactions that will be going through your bank statement. So you could filter, for example, I could say I want to filter by deposits, and it will filter the entries that I'm seeing on the screen just to make it a bit more manageable when you're doing your reconciliation. Now, as an example of that one to many, many to one, if I have a look at this line item on the statement, I can see that it actually relates to 3 different entries in bank services. So how you would do an entry like that? By clicking on the line on the statement, I'm signifying that's the line that I want to do the reconciliation for. And then down in the bank services entries, I can also resort these entries by date, by reference, by amount in ascending or descending order. And then you can just refetch to resort the entries. And in doing that, I'll be able to see this 4, 5, 6, 7 is here. So again, click on the line on the statement to signify that's the line I'm doing the reconciliation for. And then down in the bank services entries, just double click in that used column. You can see the import status starts to change. In this case, it's matched with error because I have a variance. But then I know I also want to apply against 5896. So I'll choose that entry. And then also the 5789, which is here. And again, I can double click and you can see then the status will change, many bank entries against one statement entry. So you would go about doing your reconciliation in that way. Now, when we talk about the rules and being able to generate entries in Sage 300 from your bank statement, the rules entries are on the far side of the screen here. You can also drill in. I think this is just a cleaner screen to look at. So I mentioned the rules template. You can have as many templates as are needed. If you have the same types of entries for different bank accounts, then you could just create one rule template. And you can see those rules again based on the categories. So a way to filter what you're seeing on the screen to make it easier when you're entering these rules. The transaction code, of course, is the type of transaction based on your bank. Your bank actually determines those transaction codes. But what's important here is these two columns, the compare method and the compare description. This is how you can identify the entry on the bank statement. So within the compare description field, you can enter any characters in this field. And the compare method, if I choose the equal to, in this case, it means look for the ACME at the beginning of the description string on the bank statement. I would venture to say in most cases you would use the like statement, where it will look for these characters anywhere within the description on the bank statement. So you can put whatever information in here that will properly identify the entry on the bank statement. Now, if needed, there are the capability to put in wildcards, and this will give you the ability to use more than one piece of information on that entry on the bank statement to properly identify the entry. As an example, the reason we put these wildcards in many, many years ago was we had a client that had credit cards that they wanted to identify, but multiple people shared the credit card. So they wanted to be able to identify the credit card itself and also the person whose name that charge was against. So we were able to put in wildcards so that they could put in the characters to signify the proper credit card and then put in the person's name to identify that person. Now, once you've identified the entry on the statement, you can then specify how you want to handle that entry in Sage 300. If you're using distribution codes or distribution sets, then you can just specify that, and that will then distribute it across different GL accounts. Or you could just specify an exact GL account. So for example, when fees come through the bank statement, I want to post those fees through to this particular GL account. So you can specify any GL account to post the entry through. It's going to, of course, post through bank services and then ultimately to the proper GL account. If you need to handle taxes, you can specify that information here as well. And then the type of entry that you want to create in Sage 300. So you can create a bank services entry, or you can create an entry in accounts payable or accounts receivable. So if you choose accounts payable or accounts receivable, you would then identify the correct vendor or customer. And this is just a finder to your standard Sage table, either your customer or vendor table. And then how you want to handle it for that particular vendor or customer. You have an option to create a prepayment against the vendor or customer account, and a user will come along and apply as needed. Or you can specify to auto allocate, in which case it'll just try to apply those funds to the oldest invoice. Or you could look for the actual amount or look for the document number specified. Now you could have different allocation rules for different customers or vendors as you needed to. The other thing that we add that is not available in the standard bank services module is access to optional fields. So to be clear, we're not making the bank services module compatible with optional fields, but what it does give you the ability to do, if you're using optional fields in AR or AP, then you could populate the optional fields and then post that information through to AR or AP. So the idea is you can generate more and more rules as you're doing your bank reconciliation and get, much more efficient in terms of things that will automatically match for you. So you can then spend the time on those entries that you need to take a look at. You can batch entries, you can post entries straight from here. You can also get a view into your batches within AR and AP. So you can just with a click of a button be able to view your batches in accounts receivable and accounts payable. So, so that's the key features to the main screen. Just a few other options that you have. You have the ability to determine which batches you want to post automatically. So you can specify, maybe post those bank services entries, but I want to review AP and AR batches when they get up into the subledgers. So you can choose which batches you want to post automatically. And at the top, I mentioned the bank formats. So this is where those bank formats are listed. We do divide it by region. This product is sold worldwide. But even if we filter by North and South America, you'll see there's a number of bank formats here. And, you'd be able to notice that the same banking institution could have more than one format set up within the software. For some reason, different branches could have different file layouts. So that's why we would typically just suggest that you send us a copy of the format that you're downloading from your bank, and we can then review it, because there are also some standard type file formats that'll work across multiple bank institutions. So we can have a look at that for you. If by chance the bank changes or adds a new transaction code, then you'd be able to add that here under the RecXpress transaction codes. So these would get set up when the file format is initially set up, but sometimes banks may change a transaction code or add a new one, or even change the description. So you can make those changes here within the transaction code screen. And then the security for this module, as I mentioned at the top, you install it through administrative services, which means you can set security for this module the same way you would any of the Sage modules, and you can determine who has access to the module itself. But we've added another layer within RecXpress where you can actually limit user access based on the bank account. So if you have multiple users doing bank reconciliations and they're responsible for only specific bank accounts, then you could limit their access to the bank accounts here within the RecXpress security. So that's the overview of the RecXpress for Bank Services module. It's a fairly simple module, as I mentioned, to get installed and activated and running in your organization. So I appreciate everyone taking the time today. If you have a question and you want to put that in the chat box, I'm happy to have a look at that. Otherwise, you can email me at nlavery@cogeco.ca, and I'm happy to answer any questions or get you any additional information, such as pricing or a product brochure. And I'll just mention again, we're going to start doing fairly regular webinars about every 2 weeks. And the next one coming up is 2 weeks from today at the same time. And we're going to be covering the Tyrox collection module. So thanks very much. We appreciate your time today, and hope to see you at another webinar. Yes, I do intend on posting a recording of the webinar as well, and I'll send a link to that to everyone as well.